Hey listeners, did you know that Yogi Triathlete offers endurance coaching for body and mind? We offer personalized training plans for endurance sports, wellness and mindset, nutrition and recovery guidance, and race preparation and strategy, all within the supportive community of Team Yogi Triathlete. So if you're ready to conquer your fitness goals and push your limits, our endurance coaches are ready to guide you on the journey to peak performance. Go to yogitriathlete.com today to set up your free 30-minute discovery call and embrace a future of strength, stamina, and achievement. Your goals, our experience, the perfect match for unstoppable success.
I don't need approval from anyone. I don't need to do this for any reason. If I win, great. I want to win, but if I don't think any less of myself, and I don't care what people think of me. That's a powerful place to be. That goes beyond how much can I push myself physically and see when I break. That's the place that most everyone needs to get to. But you're going to be a lot stronger when you have everything you already need. It's this stuff's just icing on the cake. Run 100 miles, awesome. But I don't gain worth from it. I don't lose worth if I don't do it. But there's a sense of accomplishment that comes with it. But you can really enjoy that accomplishment without having to let it be a check mark on your identity or anything like that.
Welcome to the Yogi Triathlete Podcast. This is episode 398 with Dr. Dave Paczkowski, and we are your hosts, Jess and BJ. In this episode, Dr. Dave is rounding out his three-peat performance on the YTP, having been the star of episode 166 back in 2019. Then alongside his incredible wife, Dr. Lindsay, in 2020 for episode 238. Both of these conversations diving deep under the surface chatter and into meaningful topics for performance and life. After following Dave's recent 100-mile journey, we were inspired to bring him back onto the show, not just because he ran 100 miles, but because of his mindset around this adventure, his training. Up until 3 months ago, he had never run more than 5 miles, and that's when he was in high school. And also because of his surprising takeaways, including his reflection that with just 3 months of training, running 100 miles is not hard. Dave is the founder of Inside Out Strength. He holds a doctorate in physical therapy and several strength, fitness, and performance certifications. And although all that's so impressive, it's Dave's journey to finding his own strength and health, along with his unshakable resolve, that makes him the very impressive ultrarunner, husband, dad, and human that so many have not just benefited from, but have come to love and deeply respect. We are honored to call Dave a friend, and we're so grateful that we're able to just ring him up, snag him so quickly after this adventure so he can share it with all of you. Dr. Dave, welcome back to the show.
I'm so honored to be here. BJ, Jess, love you guys. And excited to share about it. I totally forgot it's my three-peat on here, so I'm excited that you guys keep having me back.
So you're no stranger to challenges, as both Jess and I have worked with you personally when you were here in Carlsbad. And I think you've dropped notes of, trying to squat 500 pounds or something and run a fast 5K, something along those lines. And then there was this lunging challenge, which I think you did. Both things just got my eyes big to see that you go after these big things. And now we're sitting here going after 100 miles. And I think you and I talked years ago when you were here about, going long and running the distance, and what that would all look like. And now here you are today and you've accomplished that. So what is the seed that is planted every time you get these hits to do big, challenging things?
Yeah, that's anyone you introduced me as a ultra runner, I'm like, wow, I guess I can tack that onto the bio now, I guess. But yeah, I've done a lot of crazy things I guess some people say crazy, some people say impressive, most people say crazy, but I really haven't given it too much thought of what it's not. It's not something I'm ever, when these things come up, it's never something I'm searching for or seeking or hey, what's this next thing I can do? I just need another challenge or, fitness hit or adrenaline hit or anything. It's just these opportunities come up. And I guess when it feels like it's something that can push me, it's also something that I have peace around. Those are two big indicators for me that it's something, something worth worth pursuing. And I think the more that I've exposed myself to stuff like that, I feel like from the outside, I can see why it looks crazy or extreme or those things in talking to certain family and friends. But really on the inside, it doesn't feel like a insurmountable challenge. It doesn't feel like this thing that's like, oh, I'm going to have to really push myself. It's just something that once my mind's committed to it, I'm just like, let's do it. Let's roll. And I reach out to people I respect and ask for advice and just start putting a plan together. And, I've kind of not gotten too attached to, if I didn't finish those 100 miles, running more than 5 miles would have been more than I ever did. By the time I was a couple months into training, I'd run by far more than I ever had in my life. So, it's a win either way when you look at it like that.
When did it first kind of hit you that you wanted to do this?
August. Well, I didn't want to do this. That's the first piece to clear up. There were a friend had reached out, and it was sometime in August. I don't have the exact date, but he's like, "What'd you think about doing 100 miles this December?" I just replied, "No." I'm like, "No, I'm not interested." And then, so his dad, our pastor, actually reached out too, and he's like, "Hey, you want to come with me and do 100 miles? Like, we got a group of guys doing it." I'm like, "No, I'll come support, but I'm not interested in it." And I was just walking and trying to walk and praying and just in quiet and then it just like hit me. I'm like, shoot, I think I'm gonna do this race. And I texted my buddy back and pretty much told him like, let's do it. I'm in. And so I had said no, in my mind, I had no desire to do it. It's not like this was a bucket list item for me. I had no desire to ever run an ultra. I would have been fine if I never ran a marathon in my life, but here I am 100 miles later and just decided to do it. But a big thing with that was, Lindsay and I recently revamped our family core values, and relationships was on it, and really to do it with some people that we love and we could train with, and people we can grow closer with in something that's just like doing challenging things together with people we love is just like something we want to do more of. So really it wasn't like something, again, I wasn't like seeking for it, but an opportunity came up and I'm like, I think I'm fit enough. I want to prove if I can do this on 3 months of training. So here we are.
So the initial reaction was like, no, not interested. I'll come and support. Like, that's a great way to be in community. But I'm interested to, like, was the mind backing you up with reasons why not to do it? Like, well, I'm not built for it. I haven't run this much. Like, were you getting evidence from the mind that was like going, yeah, this is a good decision not to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were several of those things. I think because I was, from a fitness standpoint, I was felt like I was clicking pretty good after, we moved across country, and I felt like last year about this time, I was really kind of peaking in my fitness. And then with move and a new kid and those things, I felt like I took a dip the first, maybe quarter of this year. And I was slowly, it took me a few months to ramp back up. And so I felt like I was kind of getting back into my groove. And that's where a lot of the doubt, fear, whatever you want to call it, was around like me getting out of my comfort zone, so to speak, of not like, I think this is going to be too hard for me to do, but hey, I'm comfortable. Like I'm back in my box of what I know. I'm strength training. My numbers are going back up. I'm looking better. I'm feeling better. Like my body feels good. And there's a lot of tension between, well, is that a reason to say no to this opportunity that came up that I may never get again? I may not have friends that ever want to do this 100-mile thing with, that we want to do together. So I think that was a lot of it. I think time away from family was a lot of the reserve around it. I think how my body would hold up. I'm fine pushing through pain, but I have other fitness goals too. That if and we never know, but there's if I knew this was going to mess up my knees to the point of not being able to squat in the gym for another 6 months or a year, would it be worth it? In my head, that was like, probably not. But then I'm like, well, is that even is that a plausible thing that I'm already thinking that my body might hold up fine? And I have to trust that it's been prepared for this, even if it wasn't. And then I text people like BJ, people who will, totally say, no, dude, don't do it. That's stupid. And I text them and say, hey, I'm not trained for this at all. 100 miles in 3 months, probably not a good idea, right? And I don't have the exact text in front of me, BJ. You might, but you said, like, if it was put on your mind to do it, you must do it. And I'm like, all right, well, that wasn't a good help for talking me out of doing this thing.
No, we're going to say go for it. But
know.
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that text exchange.
Yeah, I remember that was a while back too. That was.
I didn't know that happened.
Yeah, and I always say that. I believe in the possibilities, and I think what you bumped up against, and what most people do, is like what the mind knows or has heard from others, that this is how you lead up to a 100-miler, and for you to see the evidence that in this moment you have 3 months to prepare yourself. All the things would probably flood in, and this is probably instantaneous most often in the mind that says, no, you need a proper ramp up. Like, what are you thinking? You need to take care of yourself. You got a family, like you love lifting weights, and to take 6 months out from the gym. And it's all this like back and forth. But in an instant, if you tap into like, I gotta pursue this and explore it for myself. Cause I think like you believe that I'm not always defined by what's normal or in the box, you could say. I think that I think I have limitless potential, and I think you believe that as well. And I know Jess and Lindsay probably do, and that's why we're connected. But we do get hung up, tripped up sometimes in that stigma that things need to be done a certain way, and we need to fall back on that in order to be successful, or what success is. But you also touched upon detachment. Pursuing this without having your kung fu grip on how it actually has to come out in the end.
Yeah, and I can expand on that, because I think it was definitely tested, because it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to actually do that. And I think it's easy for me to sit here and say like, oh, I was, whatever happened, it was a win. And I do think that deep down, but that doesn't mean I didn't want to go and crush this 100-mile race and, do it well. And so, I had people, the people that originally signed up were coming at it from different places. Some people were training a lot more diligently. Some people were like, even on the other extreme of like, oh, just show up and do it. And I'm like, that's a terrible idea, but go for it if you want. But the race we signed up for, the Brazos Bend 100, got canceled the Monday before the event. So I didn't end up doing that race. That was the one we signed up for, the one in Houston, and weather the Monday before said, hey, this thing is canceled. And that really, I was upset. I was hurt. I was frustrated. What I said is, then these thoughts started coming of like, I wasted all this time. I'm further from what I want in the gym. I'm not going to end up getting to do this race. I don't want to wait another, they pushed it back to January or something. We already had all of our trip set for this. I was peaking for this. I was tapering for it, and for it to get canceled. And thankfully I have friends that also thought the same thing. So we just, a friend of ours, Steve Weatherford, out in Dallas, I texted him when it happened, because I knew he was thinking the same thing. He was bringing 50 or 100 people to this event. Like he brought a real crew to come together, and he got a text back. He said, it's going down in Frisco this weekend still. So we drove out to Dallas, and that's where, it's supposed to be this 17-mile trail loop that you do 6 times or whatever at this state park. And we ran 100 miles on pavement, a mile loop around a church in Texas that we did 100 times. And that's how my ultra race went down. So talk about a mental, there was a 24-hour or so period in there where I was upset and a lot of things. And the people that I signed up with, the people locally here, for some good reasons, some other reasons, like people didn't end up getting to go out there for it. So we went out to Texas, and we were like, hey, we're planning on going to Houston anyways. We'll just detour to Dallas a little bit, and we'll get this thing done this week. And I'm ready to do it. I'm mentally ready. I don't want to put it off. So we ran 100 miles around a church in Frisco, Texas.
This is starting to become a theme on the podcast. We just launched a podcast with Harita Davies, who did the 3,100-mile self-transcendence race in Jamaica, Queens, New York. And it's on a half-mile block from August 30th to October 20th. And it's very much based in, she follows this Indian spiritual leader. And so, it's about being connected to a higher power, higher source. And it sounds like your community that you were doing this with, same thing, connected to something higher, which I believe, and I think you may agree, is actually what our source is for the energy, what our source is for our resolve, what our source is to be able to get that awareness to switch from problem energy, which is the race is canceled and my ego is complaining about it, to, okay, what can we make happen? And letting go of how it all looked.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you guys on that, because it's, the initial gut reaction is all, switches to selfishness and like, well, I was ready for this, and this messes with my plans and this and that. And then, as soon as you switch to, okay, God, what are you doing in this? Like, you say you work all things together for good. Like you say everything has a purpose. And then it has a switch to, all right, well, we're supposed to be in Dallas running this around a church and on pavement, as much as that sounds even more miserable to what I already signed up for. And it ended up being such a, we don't know how the other experience would have been, but I just, we choose to believe that it worked out better. I got to see my wife and my kids every single lap, and that has its challenges and its benefits. But when you're running around and they're right on the loop, helping with being my mini aid station and pit crew, it's, they brought a lot of smiles to people around the race, and definitely to myself, and getting to see them every rest break. And I got to walk 10 of those miles with my wife, Lindsay. And that stuff wouldn't have happened at the other event, among probably many other things. And you start stacking together other things. One of the guys I was supposed to run with, he had some Achilles pain that we were working through. And when the race got canceled, he couldn't make it out for that one. And one got his ankle looked at, and he had a partially ruptured Achilles that the doc said probably would have for sure ruptured if he tried running the race. Other things like that just coming up, that just protection things for some, different experiences for me to be able to do with my family for myself. And, there's just things that always come from that. And I know it'll continue to come from it too. It's like the journey from this 100-miler isn't just like done and finished. I know there's going to continue to be things that, God reveals to me that years down the road, and connections I make from it that wouldn't have happened if it didn't work out this way.
Yeah. And you don't know, like the beautiful thing about this podcast, like we don't know who's being touched by this. We don't know whose resolve is being strengthened by this. And I love that unknown, like the trickle effect, a little bit of it, people are, oh, great podcast, keep going. But you don't know the effect of somebody listening to this, and then how they interact with somebody, at the grocery store later on today after they listen. Like we just don't know. And so there's got to be a lot of trust in following what feels good. And what feels good is week after week showing up and us doing this podcast. What felt good was getting that inspiration to get you on, and here you are. And so it's like we've got to trust, although we don't know all the details, that everything is for a purpose. And I think the further that we get away from things, like when we get out of the storm of 100 miles and the storm of, the aftermath of your body recovering and all of that, more clarity comes in those clearings. And it's just beautiful, but we'll never know the whole story. We'll never know the reach. We'll never know the effect. Either way, positive or negative, so you just got to show up for what you're being called to, and do it as best you can.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. Yeah. And the BJ's text of like, if you feel like, and I don't remember exactly your phrase, so paraphrasing it, if you feel like you've been called to do it, you must. That's this 100-mile race is just the mode in this case. It's not that everyone needs to go and do ultra running or triathlons or Ironman. That's the mode for you guys, and among other things. But we have our platforms that we have, but what it's really the reach that's cool to see, and a lot of times that we don't see is how that affects just integrity and honoring your word in general, and keeping commitments to yourself and those things. I had someone reach out on Instagram that was pretty much like, hey, I've been slacking in my relationship with God. I've been complacent in these other areas, and seeing you just do what you say you're going to do was inspiring. And he's not going to go run. That doesn't mean he's going to go sign up for a 100-miler to achieve that, but it's just a way to show people what's possible. It's a way to show that it doesn't matter if you're doing a 100-miler, that might not be the thing for you. And that's probably not the thing for a lot of people, maybe outside the box of who's listening to this podcast. I know you guys attract some people who are more than willing to do that and do that again and push their limits. But, for the everyday listener, it may not be that you need to go run 100 miles. That's what it was for me. But it may be how you're showing up in your day to day, how you're showing up in your marriage or your family or at work or these different things. Like you said, Jess, at the grocery store, there's a lot smaller starts that can come from, that can lead to transformation that doesn't have to be this wild thing. That just happens to be something that I guess God continues to put me through as wild things, but I don't sit here and pretend to say that everyone should do that. A lot of people I've talked to have no desire to do that, but that doesn't mean that it can't inspire in some different way to transform in those areas.
What's your relationship with letting your yes be yes for you personally?
Yeah, for me, honor and integrity are core values of ours. I think, the weight of my word is very important. I think, letting my yes be yes and my no be no's, I think are important things. I think, it's only been over the past couple of years that I've really realized how important it was. It's always been something that I've just done. And I think I've taken for granted how, I don't say how rare of a quality it is, but unfortunately it is becoming rare in some cases. And I think it's interesting you bring that up because I had my friend Steve Weatherford running the race, and those there were comments that came up repeatedly with the people that I saw of about that of keeping my word and doing something, and the people that were cheering on from afar and sending prayers and texts and those things. The feedback over and over again was, hey, good luck, but I know you're going to do this because that's just who you are. And that's those are cool things to hear. And that's not why, I wrote something after some takeaways from it. And that's not the reason that you're doing it, but doesn't mean it's not cool to hear when it kind of confirms some things that are, highly valued by myself and our family and those things to have that impact and for people to see it.
Well, it's a brand. You're branding. Not that you're marketing yourself, but you're creating a brand for yourself. So what do you want people Well, first do you believe in yourself, and then what do you want that story to be? And somebody wise took me in the office a few years ago when I was in the corporate world and said, what is your brand? Do you want to be the person who's staying late and doing work and making sure everybody else's job is being done? Or do you want to be the person who leads by example and gets the work done and then leaves? And so it really got me thinking about my brand, and not to take it into that marketing perspective, although Nike has a beautiful brand and Just Do It, which is nullifying all excuses and noise up there. But, it's a representation of who you are when people are now on board as well and says, Dave's got it. His word is word. And then that actually strengthens your commitment even more to yourself. Not that it is weakened, but we can always find a little bit more strength and solidness in who we are as people, and getting that feedback outside, constantly pushing us, moving us forward.
Mm-hmm. And when friends initially reached out, that's why the no was the initial answer, because I used to be able to be like, yeah, let's do it. And then you actually start, the Bible talks about count the cost of anything that you're doing to make sure you have the capacity, the space, the things to be able to do it. And I would say that, and then all of a sudden I'd find myself in this place where usually Lindsay and my family would maybe be the ones that would have to sacrifice because, I said yes to a friend to do this cool thing. And now I realize that it's going to take an extra 5, 10, 15 hours a week on top of what I already have. Sorry, babe, I said I was going to do this. And and that's where I think I've definitely changed recently in terms of really, really weighing out and being slow to say yes to on something, not just because a lot of things excite me, and there's things in work and business and life and fitness and those things. And if I said yes to everything, I'd be drowning in mediocrity in terms of things I could actually get done and the people that matter most.
I think that's such a great discernment. It's not about, it was placed on your heart. And that sounds so romantic, right? Like it was placed on my heart and yes, I'm doing it. But it's similar to you. Like when I'm going to sign up for a race or I'm going to commit to something, like right now I'm in a bike camp and, just at home, and BJ's, it's like intense bike. Everything else takes a second seat to biking. And whenever I make a decision like that, I do step back. I take a walk. I, let it kind of filter through over the course of a couple of days. And then when I'm ready to make that decision, it's like, okay, on those days where you really feel like swimming and you're going to need to do a bike, like, are you in on this? Are you all in with what this decision is? Is this yes going to be a yes? And it's like, okay, I'm in. Whenever I sign up for a race, it's like, okay, there's going to be times where it sounds really exciting now because 5 of your friends just signed up, but does it really work with the travel that you've got, with the retreats that you're holding? Like, are you really good? Is it going to be like a strong yes? Are you going to have your resolve? And then once you make that commitment, those mornings or when things come up, it's like, that's when that resolve really shows up, not the fleeting inspiration of like, oh, everybody just signed up. I'm going to pull the trigger too, and then not show up for the work. But in those times where everything says like, just blow it off, it's like that resolve shows up for you and goes, hey, remember me? Mm-hmm. Like I'm the one that's going to be right here, steady Eddie the whole way. Like, let's go. This, everything takes a second seat to this. Mm-hmm. I love that. It's not just about jumping all the time. You have to live in the world, feet on the ground. And then from there, dream big and live big and do amazing things. And that, I think that's where you really get these epic adventures and experiences in your life, whether it's a 5K, 100 miles, 240 miles, whatever it is, 3,100 miles, whatever it is relevant to you. But like when you feel your feet on the ground, you've got that steadiness, not stubbornness, but like that steadfastness. Yeah, like that I think is when anything is possible.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. And one thing I want to add, I don't want to, if you're going somewhere else with that, I don't want to derail the conversation too much, but I think with that too, defining what your win is in terms of what that is. And I think for the 100 miler, that was something that, there's different ways that all in can look. And I think that's important for someone who's weighing out a decision like this, because 100 miler, for me, the win was to finish this thing, to not sacrifice too much of my strength, to continue to keep as much strength as I can. But the main goal was to finish it under cap and have my body survive the best it can, pretty much. But if you don't define that, like I had to be careful, because there's been times where all in would have been, hey, I'm going to try and run this the fastest. I'm going to try and set the best, like what's the best time someone like me can set in this. And I'm going to go try and do that. I'm going to I'm going to set aside any of my strength training right now, or at least greatly drop back in that. Family time might get compromised a little bit. And those were all things that I didn't want to do it. So I did all of it 3 months, only 3 weeks, 3 days a week of running was all I did. There was 2 morning runs I did a week for about an hour to 70 minutes, depending on the day. And I did one long weekend run, and I would get up at 3:30 to do it, because my kids get up at, now sometimes they get up at 5. They're these early birds. They keep my daughter keeps getting up early and earlier, but it was too important to me to not miss those times. So the wins I had was not just, hey, how do I go all in terms of getting the best time? But, for me, there were some different parameters and guardrails on it that made it possible, because if it was a matter of, hey, how do I set the best time to show how great of a runner I am, it would be for the wrong reasons, for one, and two, it would probably come at a sacrifice for a lot of other things that are much more important to me, long-term at least.
So those 3 runs, let's just dive into this a little bit. The 3 runs that you had, one, where did that structure come from? And it could be maybe just simply as that's the time that you had available. And what were any intensity or any intervals, or was it just all easy pace? And if it shifted in that 3-month period, what did that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, I knew I wanted to keep 3 days of strength, because I didn't want to set myself too far back. So the strength actually kind of came first. And then I said, okay, I have 3 other days. I want to still give myself 1 day to rest. And so the structure just came from, hey, I know I'm not going to prepare for this perfectly, so I'm just going to lay out a plan and follow it the best I can and be confident going into it that I know I did what I could. But so the 2 mornings a week, before I started the workday, I would just get up early and run for 60 to 70 minutes, time on feet, zone 2, kept everything zone 2 heart rate pretty much throughout. I didn't do a lot of interval stuff because, like I said, I wasn't super concerned about speed or time. I was just, how do I total as much time on my feet and get used to a low enough heart rate so that I don't bonk out too far into the race and get my body used to, filtering out any lactate and getting myself as used to I can as a new style of training, because my normal training is all short, high intensity, high weight, sprint effort type stuff. When I would do, my running was when you were helping me out with it, Beej, was like how to sub 25K was the pace I was trying to go for. And I ended up hitting like right around 21 for it. With the other lifting goals I was trying for too, but it's all been like very fast, hard effort. So this was a totally different style of training. I felt like I was going so incredibly slow. I'm like, who runs like this? I feel like I'm not doing anything. This is the slowest pace I could walk. I could walk this pace sometimes, but so that was just hard for me. And I know the importance of why I had to do that. But at the time, I'm like, this is so boring. Why am I? I'm just like, my heart rate's so low right now.
Now, I think I'd like to preface your training with the fact that I don't think for everyone they would be able to do 100. Well, I shouldn't say that. We've been saying anything is possible, right? So anything is possible. However, ideally, you're not running 3 days a week for a 100-mile race when you haven't even run over 5 miles since high school. But the thing that you have is you have this massive foundation of strength. Which, how did that play into your success?
Yeah, I'll die on that hill of the importance of strength training. That's something I've seen time and time again, and that was part of the fun of the, and I had to check myself, because there was definitely some pride and ego with like, hey, I want to show all these runners that I can just come from strength training and like show up and do this thing, and it was coming from the wrong place, but it did confirm a lot of things that like, hey, I think this is really important to, and not strength training, like heavy resistance training, not I know there's a lot of like, there's body weight stuff to do, but like a solid base of strength. And there were people at this race, and I'm sure part of it being on pavement and different things, but there were people that I got a lot of eye rolls and laughs when they asked, "Oh, what's the longest distance you've done?" I'm like, "Oh, 5K. Like, what about you?" And they're, these people are, they've run 50Ks and some people even 100Ks, and they're trying this. And a lot of people's bodies were pretty wrecked by the end of it. And I think just like knees and backs and those things. And I'm not, my knees were sore. My back was definitely sore with it, but I definitely think the ability to have a base of strength definitely buffered some of the forces through the joints and things that even people with much more running experience than me were hurting a lot more. And there's way too many factors to sit here and say causation of like, hey, strength training did that for me. I think there's, that would be way too elementary to sit here and claim that, but it's hard to say that it didn't have some kind of effect with how well my body held up leading into it and after, for how I thought I'd be a lot more sore and hurting than I was overall. So I think it definitely contributes very, very highly to that, and is a tool probably more endurance runners should have in their back pocket. I know you guys are believers in that now after some of the things we've done together, but I think it's very, very underutilized for the endurance athlete.
Mm. Well, let's, as you're talking about that, and you touched on it just a bit, strength training versus mobility versus, calisthenics. Like, you're talking more strength training as in getting in the gym, doing heavy weight, low reps, and correct me if I'm wrong, mm-hmm. versus, doing something for 6 days a week, just for like 10 or 15 minutes, push-ups, sit-ups. This takes a different form, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So I guess I'll clear it up best I can. The difference between, some people consider strength training like, oh, I did some lunges and, some single leg deadlifts and some band walks. And that's good general, like prehab strength, like you're getting some hip strengthening with that, but that wasn't, at least recent. I haven't been doing any of that. Like I've been only in the gym 3 days a week, even for the last 18 months. So it's not like I have this big endurance base, or I don't even have this big fitness base compared to maybe what I've done in the past. But at 3 days a week of about 45 minutes heavy resistance training, four lifts, usually most days, 3 days a week, 4 lifts. And that's given me enough of a base to go in and in 3 months time, ramp up to 100 miles. So that's at least what I've followed. People that are following similar things are doing some, I think it gives you more capacity to just go out and do stuff a little bit, from a strength side of things. And if you can do that in addition to, if I had more time in my schedule right now as a dad of 2, almost under 2, it's like, I just don't want to be spending a lot of time overall with fitness. So that's where I've kind of adopted that approach. But it's it's heavy. It's low, not super high volume. It's pretty high intensity though. You're getting pretty close to the this sucks by the last rep of stuff. It still hurts, but it's a high load, high intensity, and relatively low volume.
Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that. I think that is critical as people listen to this and they're like, well, I want to see what's possible for me. But also you have a background and you have a life experience of working with the body and getting strong and strength. And I also think that plays a little bit in your mind as you enter something that after 3 months of training that says, I've got some cred here in the body game. Like I'm aware of my body and it's going to show up for me, and it has showed up for me before. And so this is why, someone listening to this is like, well, I'm going to go run 100 miles. I'm going to start doing heavy strength training for 3 months and see what happens. There's a long game to this as well, and a buildup that happens, a lifelong buildup. But what that does afford, and you just pinpointed this, is like you can jump into different things whenever you want. You could probably jump into a 5K this weekend if you wanted to and crush that as well. Complete opposite realm of the spectrum in endurance sports. But it's all because your body, you show up for your body every day. You make commitment to it 6 out of 7 days. Even that 7th day, the rest day, I would say is probably the most valuable day. To give you the ability to adapt to the stress that you put on it. So yeah, I think you're just showing, go test it, go see if it's possible for you with some knowledge about the body and lifting and running, go see if it's possible, like go experience it. And that's exactly what you did.
Yeah. And maybe people hear 3 months of training for it. And it's like, well, 3 months on top of 19 years of like the past, like very heavily training in athletics and those things. So that's the caveat with it too, where I think, some people not comparing where they're at for me. And also I'm 33 years old. So there's things that maybe my body can have a shorter ramp up time than someone who's 66, potentially based on what they've done. But if someone's like, hey, I'm on a totally new fitness journey. I just started running a year ago. I don't want to discount what's possible, but what's maybe appropriate for you might be at a different point, where well over half my life now has been like pretty intense physical training and preparation. It may not have looked like 100 miles, but I've definitely put my body through a lot of things. And like you're saying, BJ, I've tested it, and it's proven it can hold. And until I hear otherwise, I'm comfortable to, not that I want to regularly be doing stuff like this, but I'm comfortable to try it if I feel like I need to.
One thing our meditation teacher has taught us, on this path of, raising our consciousness and our vibration is like, you can't skip any rungs on the ladder. And so, yes, anything is possible, but if you're going from 0, don't expect to jump to level 9 and have a solid foundation. Like you need to earn the right. That's something that BJ uses a lot with his athletes. It's like, yeah, you want, like, they'll be like, oh, I want that, sexy run that other person did. And it's like, well, you have to earn the right to do that run, or, you don't have the foundation. You haven't earned it yet, and you can't skip any rungs. So it's like, yeah, it's relative to the person and what their background is. Like, it doesn't take me much to do a half Ironman because I've been doing this for now almost 2 decades. Like I can hop on the bike, and I did a 3-hour ride the other day on the trainer. I haven't done a 3-hour ride on the trainer in a very long time. And it's just like, it's just right there. The body's like, oh yeah, we know what we're doing. Yeah, we got this. And I was fine. Yeah. It's not like I was wrecked from that. Hey, I want to talk about nutrition, because that's something now you're asking your body to digest 100 miles worth of food, 26 hours, which by the way, I read that you beat your goal time of like 3+ hours. So that's pretty cool. We like that. And there's nothing wrong with liking that. There's nothing wrong with that little competitive edge. It's okay. It's a part of us, right? It's like embracing that part of us, but it's not just who we are. So now you're going to ask your digestive system, which is all about rest, parasympathetic function, to digest food over the course of 26 hours. How did you prepare for that? Did you do any like gut training with that? And what did it look like?
I had to do gut training. Honestly, gut stuff was one of my bigger concerns going into the race, even more so. I had some right knee stuff flare up, but nothing like new to me in terms of like, oh, this is bad or anything that I'm really concerned about. But honestly, gut stuff, because I did a few of us did a 30-mile. That was the longest I worked up to in training, was like a 30-mile run. It was a lot of, the race was going to be flat, but it was a lot of incline, just like where we could find a good loop and somewhere different to do it. But 30 miles was, and I had a spot probably during that training run. I forget if it was like between 10 and 15 miles in, I had like sharp gut pain, like in terms of something I was feeling with didn't do good, and something actually kind of like brought me into a catcher squad of like keeled over a little bit of like, this isn't good. And Lindsay was massaging my gut at 20 miles to like try and get things moving. I couldn't get anything out. Like no gas was coming out, no bathroom was coming out. So I'm like, this is just intense pain. So that was on my long run. I was like, I don't know how this is going to be for actual race day. Cause if that was 30 miles, I was honestly most concerned about that. And so that was something I had to train, because typically eating for me is I tend to be more like intermittent fasting. I'm not a big breakfast person. I'll eat, smaller meal at lunch. I'll have a bigger dinner, where we tend to be, I don't like to put labels on it, but for people to quickly identify like paleo-ish, that's probably the closest to what we eat. We eat a lot of whole foods and those things. And I knew whole foods wasn't going to cut it the whole time in terms of, like just eating rice and potatoes for 100 miles. And I did that for a bit, and I did that on a lot of training runs, because that's just what I know my gut tends to feel good with. But there's definitely a lot of training of just with how many calories I was burning too. I had to start eating breakfast. I had to bump my carbs way up. I wasn't doing any tracking, but I probably went from, if I had to estimate, eating 2,100 calories a day on average to maybe close to double that, on like definitely 3,500, 4,000 calories in terms of average over the course of the week. So it was significantly more on my gut. And then of course, a week up to race day, I just was having a lot of gut problems, and I reached out to a naturopathic doc that we worked. He's out in Carlsbad, California as well, but Dr. Derek, and was like, hey dude, like I want to get my gut right next year, but like right now I need this right now. So can you give me some stuff to do to help with this? And he sent me over, we talked about it. He's like, yeah, I think you just have like some, leaky gut, irritable bowel type stuff of, just with like how many carbs I was taking in. And even the supplements I was using was like, quote, clean supplements of, like cassava flour, like a starchy, like cassava flour, like sweet potato flour type things. But my gut just wasn't used to that many carbs specifically. I'm not normally super high carb, but I knew I was going to have to be for it. So he gave me some things to do, got in line for it, and was great for it. So I'm grateful for him to be knowledgeable to help me out with that. But that was it was interesting that it was a total shift for fuel I'm used to running on, from timing of eating to eating while running, getting up at 3:30 and eating breakfast felt like it was like terrible. I'm like, what is my body's like, what are you doing putting all this food down and into your body? But I was just trying to get used to having food in my stomach for running. Cause even if I'm trying for a max 5K, I'm probably doing that fasted. When I'm training in the morning, I do almost all my training fasted. I'm used to running on empty, and that sounds terrible for some people, but that's just what I've done for at least the past 10, 15 years probably. And it's just what feels good for me. So it was definitely a major 180 in terms of what I was used to. Wow.
And how did it work on race day?
Worked good. Yeah. I tried keeping, I kept it more like rice, potatoes, some honey, some fruit as long as I could before I got into more junk food that I just was craving and feeling. But I kept that probably for like the first 20 miles. Then I used a lot of like PB&J and potato chips. I had a couple sips of Dr. Pepper in the middle of the night, which I haven't had soda in like, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I'm like, this is such a dopamine hit in so many ways that is needed at this time of like sugar and a little bit of caffeine and childhood nostalgia. So it was fun to play around with some of that and just like do some different stuff for it. I hadn't tested a lot of it, but again, at that point, I was comfortable enough that I just knew I was going to be fine at that point. Once I got rolling with it and was feeling good.
Yeah, nice. Let's touch upon your takeaways. Let's start with the first one, which is you're less healthy because of this. That was one of your takeaways. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, these probably push some buttons to some people, but they were my honest and fun takeaways that when I sat down to journal after, and it wasn't the things I was expecting would come up from it, and we can circle back on that at the end if we have time. But yeah, I think overall I don't feel more healthy from running 100 miles, and I think that gets back to why are you doing it, or why are you doing any of your training in general, whether that be a set race or, hey, I'm supposed to do more cardio, so I'm going to go run 3 days a week in addition to what I'm doing, may not be getting you closer to what you actually want to be doing. And I say that based on the metrics that are most important to me. Now, I guess caveat that I didn't track a lot of things for me. Like I didn't do blood work testing. I didn't do, overall cardiovascular health markers or anything like that. So I'm not saying, on all levels, I'm less healthy, but in terms of the markers that are important to me, like one being just how my energy is and how my joints feel, how my digestion is, those were net negatives overall. Body composition actually, I think, got worse. I think strength training is one of the best ways to improve body composition. It's a lot easier to be in a slight calorie deficit, which if you're trying to lean up and lose weight is essential for that. My overall strength went down. I hung on to it pretty well. I was still, I think 2 or 3 weeks before the race, I'd have to look exactly where it was. I hit 355 for a set of 5 on squat. So like happy that I was able to hang on to a lot of that. That's not lightweight by any means, but less than what I was doing leading up to it. So that's where that comment came from, is overall, according to the things that are most important to me right now in terms of how I was feeling on about 2.5 to 3 hours a week of training compared to what took me 10, 12, 15 hours a week of training. I'd say that was a net negative in terms of overall health for, bang for the buck stuff, which is just important for me in the season with our family and those things too, to have that. So that's what I was getting at with that, even though, some people might think otherwise.
What was your biggest surprise takeaway? Like you thought going into this X would happen and you came out of it with this?
To be honest, it was, and I wrote about this in the takeaways. It was probably that I paused because I don't want to like irritate. It wasn't that hard, to be honest. Like it really wasn't. The 100-mile race was not that hard. Now what I explain with that, when I compare it to showing up for Lindsay every day and not being selfish, when I compare it to raising 2 kids in this world right now, when I compare it to just being a good husband, father, friend, son, showing up at work, like there's other things that I think are a lot harder, where I think there's and not gearing this towards men, but there's definitely a masculinity thing to like David Goggins and things of like, well, just go out and like do it and just push through it, and like pain is nothing, this and that. And I think that gives a sense of being macho, but I don't think during the 100-mile race, it was just a realization I had during an effort. I was like, this isn't nearly as hard as a lot of things that life calls us to, and fitness in general, I don't think is, I love it, and I love challenging myself, and I love doing those things. And sure, I can go push it harder and push it more, but none of those things are going to give me the thing I'm looking for anyways. It's not like I'm trying to prove anything. And I journal about this. I didn't share it on the article, but I share it with Lindsay, and I'll share it here. Is I realized after the fact, with all the texts that were coming in about the attaboys and so proud of you and the knew you were going to do it and those things, those were things that previously would have really, I would have fed off of and like been looking for that affirmation from outside people and things and family and friends and like all these people I respect and love, like really think I'm awesome. And it just like those comments landed empty. And I was journaling about it and I said that there wasn't anything I needed to get from this race. And I think that's why I ran so much of it with just peace and joy. And I was present, and it wasn't this like crazy mountaintop experience that I thought it was going to be. But I said the race was just a reflection of what was already inside of me. And that's why I felt like it was just something that was easy, not in terms of there wasn't any physical struggles or there weren't any mental struggles or parts where I was like, this sucks. I don't want to run another loop around this church in a parking lot. There was definitely some of that, but it was far less than I thought. And what I'm saying is, comparing it to other parts of life, it just wasn't that hard. And it wasn't the surprising piece as well was just like, I thought there was going to be a moment where I was like needing to push through this breakthrough moment that you think would come from something like this, where it's like, oh, this mile I went to and I didn't think I could go on anymore. And like Lindsay encouraged me, and I reached out to God and he answered me, and he gave me this like strength that I knew could only come from outside of me, and, spoke to me in this way. And like, there was just none of that. It was just like, I ran another lap and another lap and another lap. And like, eventually I was done. And I was like, that's cool. Like I did this, but there wasn't this monumental experience that I think going into it, maybe I expected of like, God's going to speak to me in some unique way. And there's going to be a time where I can't draw my own strength anymore, and I'm gonna have to get it from outside of it. And there just wasn't that. And I realized after the fact, I'm like, that's not what I needed from this race. I didn't need some proof of worth or anything like that. And I think that was a very cool takeaway in hindsight that I wouldn't say I was expecting or looking for, but I maybe assumed that would happen at some point where I would get to the end of my rope and I would need to draw on something else. And I didn't. I kept going, and I was done, and I was thankful to be done.
And you've got some more takeaways. And so if people want those takeaways, which I highly recommend reading this article, we'll put a link in the show notes to it on the blog. But I want to touch upon something in this last part of our interview. You had talked about like, there was nothing out. I didn't need anything outside of me, right? But there was a time, and you write about this really when you're introducing yourself on your website, about how there was a time where you were looking outside of yourself, programs, and then when they didn't work and you didn't find what you were looking for, you would blame the program, and then you would start another program, and then eventually there was this realization that you were like, there's no new program that's going to change me. Like, I have to change me.
Yeah, and that's how often do we look for external things to do that? For me, that's been fitness for so long. That can be money and things and other pursuits and work and career and net worth and family. Like there's plenty of good things that we can use for I don't say for negative purposes, but if it's for validation, if it's for pride, if it's for those things, it's not going to work. And I think a big thing I didn't realize till after I dropped my frequency of training way down is how much I used, without even knowing it, a lack of awareness around it, was how much I used fitness as an escape from the things that I needed to be doing. Because no one's going to argue if I'm going to the gym 6 days a week for an hour and a half at a time. It's going to be hard to argue like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be trying to improve your body and you're trying to get healthy. Like it's an easier escape. Sure. If you're drinking alcohol or escaping into drugs or, doing things like that, it's a little easier for someone to call you out, but it's harder for someone to check you when it's like a healthy thing. And that's why work in business is a slippery slope, because, hey, I'm trying to provide for our family. Like I'm trying to be a good provider. I'm looking after our kids and our future as guys slip away and escape to 60, 80 hour work weeks. And they're present in the home, but their kids don't really know them, or they're not there for those things. And I think it can happen in so many ways. And I think that's where, I touch on this in what I was writing about, like endurance. And I use endurance events because that's what I was just a part of. But like fitness in general, endurance events can be a sneaky way to escape, just because you set this goal. Maybe it's 6 months out, 12 months out, and it requires 20 hours a week at some point of your training. And if you're doing those, if you have a family and you're doing those in the middle of the day, you're like, hey, honey, I got to go run for 4 hours. Like, good luck with the kids. I know the weekend's the only time I'm home, but I'm going to go do this. Like, I think it's just, it can be a slippery slope of escapism, and pride and ego are definitely some of those things. I want people to approve of me. I want to look good, so people, think this certain thing of me. And it took a lot of inner work to get rid of those things that are ingrained deep. And there's a lot that goes into that from childhood and growing up and those things. And it's something that without awareness around it, without being willing to do the hard work, the work that's a lot harder than running 100 miles is doing stuff like that eventually moves you closer to the outcome you want, that you think you're going to get from accomplishing this race, the things you think you're going to get from hearing these words of approval or praise. It's only the inner work that's going to eventually do some of that. And there's lots of different ways to get at that, but for us, it was a radical vulnerability with God and realizing that I needed Jesus to work in my heart and clean up some mess that I had that I didn't realize I had, and those things. And there's different ways people can get to it, but it's something that you're always going to look for that next thing. If you don't do the uncomfortable work that isn't flashy and isn't fun and is real though, and sticky and hard and hurts, again, revisiting old hurts and those things. So, there's a lot that goes in that question, but I 100% agree with you guys. And I know, knowing you guys, I know there's, coming from a similar place of knowing how important that work is above any of the physical things that you're going to be doing.
Yeah, we had a conversation with our teacher this morning, and he was like, he's like, just, he's always like, watch the mind, watch the mind, watch the mind. And he's like, look at those, really watch the habits. He's like, we could also use the word karma, whatever it is, right? The results of our past actions. And he's like, and look for the big ones. Look for the ones that have been reoccurring for a long time. He's like, because the little ones, that'll all follow. Don't worry about the little ones. He's like, look at the big ones. There's probably just a couple, and just keep working there. Just keep aware, keep working there. And I think that's really when you clean up your inner house. And I think you'll agree, I've been sweeping the floors of my inner house for a long time. And I'm like, Jesus, there's still another pile of crap over here. It's a lifelong journey. But I think that when you have that resolve to cleaning up your inner house and really really finding out who you are, I think that resolve is that's why I think it's easy for me to get it this morning, get up at 4 a.m, get my meditation in so I can get to the pool by 6. That's easy. It's those moments when BJ and I fall into a very familiar cycle that we've had since we were 25 years old, to say oh, we're in it now, and let's recognize this for what it is. It's just a cycle. It's just a pattern. It's a habit. What do we need right now? Let's go take a walk. Let's get away from each other. I need to breathe. I need to meditate. I need to do yoga, whatever it is. And that, I think when you have that kind of resolve, it's everywhere in your life. It makes everything that much easier. But there's going to be no new program or no new trend or no new supplement that's going to make the change that you really, truly want until you turn your eyes inward and start really looking at those things that are repetitive in your life, and realize that you are the master creator of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so good. And that's, when you're at that place, those are the people that are scary. And I say scary in a good way of when you talk, and I don't mean to knock on Goggins. I don't know a lot about him, but he can't hurt me. I don't know a lot about him. I know his personal life is sometimes sounds like a mess and those things. But can't hurt me from a place of hey, I don't need approval from anyone. I don't need to do this for any reason. If I win, great. I want to win. But if I don't, I'm not I don't think any less of myself, and I don't care what people think of me. That's a powerful place to be, that goes beyond how much can I push myself physically and see when I break. That's the place that I'll say everyone needs to get to. But you're going to be a lot stronger and have everything. When you have everything you already need, it's this stuff's just icing on the cake. Run 100 miles. Awesome. but it doesn't make me feel any. I don't gain worth from it. I don't lose worth if I don't do it. But there's a sense of accomplishment that comes with it. But you can really enjoy that accomplishment without having to let it be a check mark on your identity or anything like that.
And so you achieved 100 miles, another epic feat, but you didn't do it alone. You had an amazing support system. How was it seeing Lindsay out there at every mile? I'm assuming you stopped every mile to see, or maybe you kind of cruised through, but at least you got to see them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got to see Lindsay, and when the kids weren't sleeping or getting into. Not to go too far off track, Elise probably had, like, talk about carb loading. She probably had like the best toddler day of her life. Everyone, because she was one of the only kids there, and she's cute as can be. So everyone's walking up with like treats and candy and those things, and we're like whatever. And so she was just like she was in probably toddler carb heaven with that. But I got to see them every lap. Yeah, I run by. I made a mental strategy was to actually sit down and stop every 6 miles so that I wouldn't have the inner dialogue of like, well, should I stop this mile? Should I keep going? So that was knowing that it was a 1 mile loop. We communicate up front. I'm like, hey, I'll kind of run by. If I really need anything, I'll stop quick. But every 6 miles is when I'll actually like stop and sit down for a minute. So that was helpful. But yeah, she was amazing. Lindsay was just like, the thing she did was far more challenging than, talk about something new in the podcast, far more challenging than any 100-mile race she was pit crew for me. She was pit crew for a friend of ours in terms of like making all snacks, having all things on hand. She watched 2 kids, 2 years old and a 5-month-old. She didn't leave at all. She stayed there from 7 a.m. on Saturday till 10 a.m. on Sunday. She didn't leave at all. The kids slept in the car. She fed and kept 2 kids alive. Like, talk about superwoman right there in terms of any one of those things would have been crazy on its own. And she ran a half marathon over those 24 hours. So she, off and on, she paced our friend Phyllis on 2 of the laps. She ran with me on 10 of the laps. So, talk about amazing. It was fun to watch her. And, those words carry a little more weight when hearing how proud of me that she was and how inspiring it was. Those things are just cool to hear and have her there for.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And it doesn't surprise me knowing Lindsay. She's so strong. And she is like an incredible cheerleader and solid, she's solid. She's got that solid foundation, just like you. Thank you so much, Dave. This has been a great conversation. Love having you on. It's great to see you. We haven't talked or spent any time together, I think, since the last time we had you on the show. So, selfishly, just wonderful to see you. And please give Lindsay and the kids our love. And, I'm sure this won't be the last time we see you on the show.
And where can people follow you now?
Instagram's the best place. I got out of hiatus leading up to the race. So Dr. Dave Pack there, DRDAVEPAC. That's the best place to find me. Message me, follow along. We post a lot of fitness stuff on there, but you'll see a little of our family and all that too. So follow along, reach out there if you guys need anything. BJ and Jess, I love what you guys are doing. We love you guys. It's cool. We can pick up right where we left off on something like this. We didn't need any prep time or run time up to know what we were talking about. So I always love seeing you guys, and honored to be on every time, but especially 3 times means a lot.